Hi there, and welcome to Holfs Sea Fishing. Today you're joining me and have a little trip down to the River Mersey. I'm doing this purely to get out of the winds forecasted today, well, for the weekend. Tomorrow's forecast very, very strong winds, and the forecast for today is forecast to, well, I mean, out of my house right here, right now, the trees are swaying about, but it's forecast to get a lot worse later on. So I'm hoping I can just sort of get in between where it's going to be windy at the moment to where it's actually going to be getting really windy later on. So safety really for me is the paramount. I'm trying to find somewhere sheltered and where I can fish, wet a line, scratch the itches, so to speak, and go and enjoy some fishing. To do this, I've decided to go back to the River Mersey for a try, this time at Eastham. I have fished this area a little bit, but I'm going to try an area where I know it's going to be facing completely the opposite direction to the wind. And I haven't fished this little area before. I'm just going to have a little look, really. Go down with some frozen baits, some lugworm and some mussel mainly. And I'm going to try for a codling and stick a scratching rig out as well, just to see what else might be about, as codling do seem to have been quite thin on the ground, from the shore anyway. As I say, the primary reason for this session to this spot is to literally get out the wind, because at the moment it's windy, but later on this evening it's going to get very, very windy, so I really wouldn't want to be fishing in that. Safety first. I would rather fish today, although it is going to be potentially windy. I think I've got a good spot for shelter here, and it ultimately keeps me nice and safe. And you never know, I might just drop looking, pull a codling out the River Mersey as well, which, as I say, they have been quite elusive this year so far. So what I'll do, I'll bring you back shortly. I'm just going to show you the bait that I'm taking. I just want to show you my what I call my frozen blanched lugworm. They are I go on about these all the time, and I'm sure I will mention them time and again. I will put the method on how I actually preserve these lugworm, because I see the frozen lugworm that people get from the shops, or they're frozen at home, their own pumped maybe or dug, and when they're defrosted, they just basically go like, I don't know, like stretchy bags of snot, really, and they're a nightmare to fish with at times. And of course they do catch fish, but they're just a pain being like they are when they've been frozen. So I'm just going to quickly show you my lugworm that have been blanched, and then at some point I will show you how I do those. Okay, these are my frozen blanched lugworms. I can't recommend these enough. Quite often in the past, when people have seen these, they actually think they're fresh. When you look at them, I've had that happen a few times. Now these are only small ones. These are just small ones, but they literally, as you will see, almost look like a fresh lugworm. And these, of course, every species that I ever fish for. So whether it be a thornback ray, a bass, the biggest bass I think was a £6 bass on these, fishing for flatfish. I've had smoothhound takes these. I've had whiting take these, codling take these, place, anything you can think of taking these worms. And when you see the process that I put them through, it's very easy. And what you get at the end of it, when you defrost your bait to go fishing, is in essence is a bit like a stick of licorice. Now there's when you wind that in again from being cast out for 20 minutes, or however long you have it out there in the water, this bait will still be this shape. It will come back almost, if you will, for all intents and purposes, looking like a fresh lugworm. Not a big, long, stretched out bag of snot, as I always tend to say. So I'm going to be fishing with these today, and as I say, we'll see how we get on. But yeah, frozen blanched lugworm that I do. I will put a video up for these at some point. And as you can see, I mean, these aren't. I swear to you, these absolutely are not fresh lugworm. They're only small ones. These are granted. They're not big worms. These at all. They're primarily just for flatfish, really fishing. But these, I promise you, these are not fresh worms. These are frozen blanched worms that I've done. That was shown a number of years ago. Okay, I wanted to just show you very briefly the two rigs I'll be using today on today's little fishing trip. As I've mentioned previously, especially in my little introduction video, which I'll put a link in if I remember, I tried to keep my fishing very simple. Rigs are very, very simple, as you'll see here. So today I've got a simple running ledger set up as a little paternoster, the running weight there. You'll also notice on the weight I have a little clip. It's like an impact splashdown. You can put your hook through there, lock it in place. The water, as it hits the waters, pushes up and pushes the hook out. If you haven't seen these before, they are very good. And it literally, when the weight is going through the air, the hook then swivels behind the weight, and it's sat nicely as a lump behind the weight, and it's very, very aerodynamic. It does help cast if you want a bit more distance. Not that I tend to cast a lot of distance, but I think it just preserves the bait a bit more during flight as well. If you've got baits flapping around everywhere and trying to get a bit further, not only reduce your cast distance, that's what you want, but also it will. It's not good for the bait gets there. Been battered about more, I feel, whereas behind the weight it's been protected a little bit. Weight, I'm fishing the River Mersey. I don't really care if it's got a little bit missing off the weight there. It still grips the bottom fine. As I say, everything's very simple. Doesn't bother me the weather's not got, the weight's not got that yellow orange piece on it. Simple swivel, and then we'll go down to a 12-18 inches of line, 30-pound line for the hook length. That's amnesia. If you're going to use hook length material, for me, I always use amnesia. This line is literally, it's not indestructible, bomb-proof, but it's as close as you're ever going to get with fishing line amnesia, in my personal opinion. I've used it for years. There may be other lines out there these days, but why go away from something that is just works and brilliant for me? It's just absolutely brilliant. The body itself of the rig, which, as I say, is a swivel at the top end. We have a link to the weight, a bead, a little rubber tubing buffer over the knot to the next swivel. But this line here, the rig body line, is I think £80. £80 rig body line. You can buy any rig body line. I've got no preference really. There's one or two which I always tend to go to. Can't remember the names of them now, just because they tie knots a bit easier, a bit slicker, if you will. So it helps you to pull the knot easier without cutting hands and things like that. On the hooks themselves, I've got I do use quite a lot for the bigger species, the Varivas big mouths. There are other hooks that I use as well, but just on this rig it's a Varivas, and that's a size 4.0. And then this is a 3.0. I can't remember the make of this one off the top of my head at the moment, but it's another 3.0 pennel hook. So for fishing my big sort of lugworm baits, I've got a hook at the bottom, and I'll have a hook at the top in the form of the pennel hook there. That's my rig. It's a standard rig that I use a lot of the time for lots of my fishing, and that's one of the rigs I'm going to use today. Okay, so the second rig I'm going to use today, again, is nothing complicated. It's a simple, well-known rig that's used by many, many anglers. As I say, simplicity is the name of the game, always is nowadays. You will see I've recently got an £80 rig body. I have on metal booms off the body. I've got one at the top here, and I've got one a little further down, trapped with beads, and I've got £80 main line here through the rig body itself. £80 line, so a clip at the bottom for the weight, and then off these booms I have again, as on my other hook length, it's £30 amnesia, as I say, because it's brilliant. It's very, very resistant to scuffs and fraying, and it's a memory-free line, so it doesn't stretch, and it ties very, very good knots. And I think I've put 2.0 hooks, Aberdeen style hooks, on these. I'm simply going to just pop a lugworm on each of these. And quite often what I find is, with this type of rig, quite often I will fish 2-hook or 3-hook rigs, is that although I may be fishing a rig like I showed you just a moment ago with a big bait on it, for some reason you tend to get more big fish on the smaller baits. Now, I've got a bit of a theory to why that is, but my advice is, if you're fishing 2 rods, it's worth putting one out with 2 or 3 baits on it. And I think my little theory on it is that if you've got fish in the water and they pick up the scent trail of one bait, I think by the time they get there, is that food item still going to be there? And I think if you're a fish and you've been around and you know how to get food, we've learnt a few things along the way. If you pick up a few smaller scent trails, well, I would think that there's more chance of that fish when it does get there that there's going to be something left. Whereas if it's only picking up one scent trail, there's a chance by the time it actually gets to it, it's maybe gone. And that's only my little theory, that. So I've been testing it the last couple of seasons, and it is kind of really showing to be that way, that if you have 2 or 3 baits on, it does seem to draw more fish rather than just having one really big bait, which can be given out a fantastically brilliant scent trail, of course, on one really big bait. But so often I've been fishing for flatfish, and I've caught rays and bass and conger eels, smooth hounds on the little hooks. I mean, these aren't particularly little hooks, these are 2 O's. I mean, I'm talking size 6s sometimes for flatfish on 3 hook boom rigs. So my advice, always do fish, unless you do really want to go all out for a big fish of sorts, and you just want to fish big baits and you maybe need the big hooks. But yeah, do keep in mind, this is a very basic rig. Fishing the River Mersey, chances are you are going to lose some tackle. I'm not going extravagant, trapping these boons with these fantastic crimp things and all the rest of it. It's worked perfectly fine as it is, as a very basic rig. So that will be the other rig that I will be fishing with today. So I've arrived at this spot at Eastham by the tap. I'm sure people do know about this one already. I've seen people fish on here before. I've never fished it myself, and I purely just so I can wet a line, because behind me I am completely cut off from the westerly winds, or virtually cut off. So whilst there's strong winds, I can watch the planes take off and get rodding. Here we have two blanched lugworm, look almost as good as fresh. Let's see if there's anything out there. Well, I'm about to put my second bait in. I'm already getting what I suspect are whiting bites on the first rod. The 2 baits on. We won't do it now, but we've got some signs of life at least, so that's good. We're not out for a monster really. We'll have whatever we can get. It's just nice to be out, to be honest with you, because it's supposed to be pretty atrocious weather later and tomorrow all day. So it's nice just to get out and have a go, and I'm still getting little touches on there, which is good. The second bait I'm about to put in is the lug and mussel sausage, and that's on the clip, top of the weight there, the splashdown. In cast, that will sit behind the weight, and it's one lump rather than dangling around. So hopefully that will present nicely on the bottom. Rod's biting again there, which is nice to see. Not a very big bite, but still it's a sign of life. And to be honest with you, as I say, I wasn't really planning this fishing this weekend because of the conditions and the winds being as they were. Safety has to come first when fishing. So what we'll do is we'll get the second rod in, and we'll see what happens. So that's both rods in now. I didn't take much notice of the depth of the drop when I cast the first rod in. The second rod there, I cast that in, and it took quite a long time to touch down on the bottom. So there's one thing for sure, there's plenty of depth here. So I'll give it a good go over high tide, and we'll see if there's anything around. I would hope for some whiting. So anything else other than that would be an absolute bonus, to be honest with you. So some whiting. Let's see what happens. So fishing here is as mentioned previously, is a new spot to me. I've had a quick look at it in the past. I've had a little look at it on Bing and Google Maps, I think Bing, the tide shows it out, and Google, I think the tide's in, or vice versa, I can't remember which. And I've got a rough idea looking on those maps that to my left here it's more mud, and to my right it's more rougher ground, so I can kind of pick and choose a little bit. The tide run for this size of tide here is actually quite manageable, so I'm quite pleased about that, and I'm still getting little bites. So for a new spot, I said this isn't something I would normally do to fish here, because I've never fished it before. But sometimes when your hand's forced a little bit due to conditions and or tides and or free time you have around family and general life and work commitments, and with what bait you've got in and things like that as well, I'll take this because it's a nice afternoon. Actually, it's not too bad at all. I brought the umbrella. I hope I'm not going to need that, but I'm looking across the river. I think that's Otter's Pool over there. The other rod's getting a bite now as well, so I've got a feeling we're going to be getting something soon enough. Don't want to tempt fate and jinx myself. I've done that in the past plenty of times, but both rods have been biting away now, so hopefully we'll have something to show you, and we'll be back. Well, just a bit of scenery. A ship coming down. It looks to have unloaded as the water line's exposed. Called Golden Oak. It says no smoking on the very front of the ship. On the back of it there. No smoking, so yeah. Wonder what that was carrying. He's going out now anyway. Obviously very deep at this section here, which is why it took a while to hit the bottom. And there it goes. Thankfully you won't touch my lines. It's quite deceptive how far out that actually is. People don't appreciate that sometimes when they see boats going past. Actually further out than they realise, but that's one heck of a boat ride. Yeah. And the rod's still biting away there as well. So encouraging. Not a bad little place to fish. To be honest with you, it's a place I've come down just hoping to sort of not be too busy. Try to sort of fish areas that aren't too busy. I hate what you call combat angling, you know, where lines are getting crossed and people, it's just hard work, and I don't like that. Well, this here is lovely, it's great. My plane's taking off, I've got a boat going out, I've got bites on the rods, just about to pour a cup of coffee, and the rods will be brought in shortly, hopefully with some fish. So really pleased, first cast, and we got 2 whiting. Not especially big ones, both on the blanched lugworm, which you can see actually this one's just come off the hook flapping about. And you see the blanched lugworm still looks like a lugworm, not a big bag of snot, as I was trying to say on my video earlier on, and one of the first clips. Whiting there, we getting put back in just a moment. A slightly better whiting here, and again you can see nicely they're hooked. That lugworm is still quite nicely, looks just like a fresh lugworm, not like the frozen ones would do normally. So we'll get them back, but blank saved, and 2 nice whitings to get us off the mark. Great stuff. So brought the second rod in for the first check, and the bait has been absolutely hammered by whiting, I'm suspecting. Has been absolutely hammered. So yeah, there's lots of whiting out there, which is good because in there you want to be kept busy with something, even if Mr. Codlin doesn't show. I have been lucky this year. I've had one on the Otter's Pool on the other side of the Mersey, but I still want to catch something, and I'm quite happy to catch a few whiting over the next couple of hours, but you never know what's going to come along. That's the great thing about sea fishing. I've been fishing for plaice and caught bass, I've been fishing for rays and caught smoothhounds. You can fish for whatever you want, ultimately anything can come along. Depending where you fish, of course, and you know what bait you're using, but sometimes you can be surprised. So we'll keep at it. That's definitely getting refreshed. Get a nice new one on. We'll come back in a little while. So both rods are back in again now, and been getting bites straight away on the 2-hooked rig with the blanched lugworm on it. it seems like a nice little spot. It does have I think this is actually a bit of a pathway here alongside, so I imagine in summertime it may well get quite busy with dog walkers and things, but at the moment I haven't seen anybody. There's somebody else, another angler down there, but apart from that I haven't seen anybody at all, which is nice. Just to get some peace and quiet. Apart from the planes going up, I don't mind those. A bit of entertainment. There's something to watch. These bites I've been getting, I haven't struck any of these bites at all. I see a lot of this is more just health really. I see a lot of new anglers who see a rod go with a bite and they just pick it up and wind it in. And I often think, why are you doing that? No one's told you. No one's sort of giving you the basics in a way. It depends what species you're fishing for, admittedly. You know, if I was fishing for bass, then I will pick up the rod and I'll strike it in at the right time. But if you're fishing for things generally whiting, flatfish, you know, you don't need to go rushing in and picking the rod up and striking it left, right and centre and holding it in. You're just pulling the bait out of the fish's mouth really, or away from the fish's mouth. Small hooks certainly on the right hand rod there, they'll usually hook themselves. Those two whiting I brought in a moment ago, they were both perfect lip hooked, and in my mind, because there's a bit of tide run here, when they're pulling on the bait and the hook, they inadvertently hook themselves. If the tide run drops off, you tend to find, you know, if you are still getting bites, they won't hook as easily themselves because they've not got the tide run pulling on them. But and on the big rod, or the bigger hooked rod to the left with the mussel and lug sausage bait on it, well, it's got big hooks, so I'm not really expecting to get any whiting on that, although I will probably still get another one potentially, even on a big hook, because they're quite persistent species when they are feeding. But the big hooks with the big bait, you know, if I was lucky, I'm expecting to get a decent pull down bite on that of a codling. I might strike that. If you give me slack line, then I'll just pick that up and probably wind it in. If you slack line me, it's probably already hooked. So yeah, just smaller fish, smaller bites. Don't be in too much of a hurry to strike them, is a bit of advice for you. Right, we'll carry on with the fishing and we'll see how we go. So we have another cast and another whiting. This time slightly bigger, which is good to see. And we'll basically get that one back in just a moment. But with the hook on the other bait, it's completely gone. So we're going to be shortening the cast down here now, the time of the casts, because it's not worth leaving them out that long, because the baits are getting stripped. So we'll get the baits back in and refreshed. Well, that's fishing for you, isn't it? I am chuffed to see that. That is a little dab. It's admittedly a little one, but it's coming. I've just unhooked it off that big hook. It was just hooked. It just lightly hooked. And it just basically just kind of really just fell off as I got it onto the grass. But what a nice surprise. I wasn't expecting to see a dab here. Maybe you do get them here quite regularly, I don't know. But you find that sometimes fishing for rays, you'll catch dabs and they'll take the big hook and somehow get caught. And he's perfectly formed. Little dab, nice and clean on the bottom as well. Really, really nice to see a change of species, because whiting are great to catch when there's not a lot going on in the winter months. But really nice to see a change of species like that. Anyway, let's get him back. And we'll get the rod back in again. Nice surprise, little dab. Thank you very much. So you may have just noticed when I caught that little dab, sometimes referred to as a sand dab, I was really quite pleased to catch that, and rightly so. Firstly, I do have a little bit of a thing for flatfish. I don't know what it is really, I just think they're cool. And you don't catch them all the time unless you specifically target them, generally with smaller hooks. So they are a cool little fish, and the real good thing about that, from a winter fishing perspective, is that when you're fishing rivers, you've got the Mersey, you've got the Dee, and wherever your local river may be, the question quite often comes up when you get rain, you know, is there too much fresh water in the river that you're fishing? And sometimes it's hard to tell. You know, I mean, if you've had a lot of rain, maybe there can be too much fresh water in the river. But actually catching seagoing fish, like whiting and dabs, for me as an angler is always a good sign, because that tells me that the fresh water content is fine. There's not too much fresh water in it. The salt water level here is absolutely fine. So, you know, for the outside chance of a codling or whatever else you might be targeting, in your river estuary, if you're getting seagoing fish such as whiting and dabs, then you are definitely okay as far as fresh water is concerned in your river, in your estuary. So yeah, really pleased to see that dab. Both rods have been going again since. I've been kept busy, and for now again the rain's holding off. The tide has turned now, so we shall see what happens. But yeah, really pleased so far. Nothing massive. We weren't really expecting anything massive. Anything like that should come along, then yeah, I'd be very surprised. But again, wasn't expecting a dab. So you just never know. If you ain't out there trying, as I say, you'll never know. Now that's actually uncanny, because I've just brought this rod in again, and 2 fish on. There's the whiting, and the other fish, which dropped off as I lifted it out of the water, was another dab. Slightly bigger than the one I had previously. So yeah, there's obviously dabs about here. I'm actually contemplating dropping my hook size down a little bit, because I really do like to catch flatfish. So I'll see how I feel. The problem is, if I drop it too small, you know it is. Something big might take it, but you know, saying that, I've had better fish on small hooks before. I'm not overly expecting anything massive. But yeah, again, really interesting, and really nice to see another little dab. And of course, I still managed to get a whiting anyway. He'll be going back. No problem at all. Yeah, it'll be fine. Let's get him back in the water. There is just something I want to show you here, very briefly. That both these hooks just had a fish on them. And that's the frozen blanched lugworm there. Okay, and that hook there, I can get it to focus for you, that's a frozen blanched lugworm. Now, you look at a normal, usual frozen lugworm that I haven't blanched, it would never look like that. I can still see the hook point sticking out of that. When I fished with frozen lug of old, years ago now, they would just be hanging over the point of the hook, all in a big blob on the bottom of the hook bar now, covering the point. Really, you know, not helping your situation, trying to hook what it is you're trying to catch. But as you can see, that's not a fresh lugworm. That really isn't a fresh lugworm. That is a frozen blanched. And both, even though they've had fish on them, they're still intact. Anyway, we're going to refresh them anyway, because they're a bit washed out, and we'll see if we can get any more whiting, or even if we're lucky enough to get, and fortunate enough to get another dab. Well, that just goes to show you, the forecast said no rain until later on tonight, and the brolly's up, and it looks like it's going to pour down, because I can't even see the other side of the river over there now in the distance. It's disappearing. There's a big boat coming up now as well, you'll probably hear in view. As far as the fishing, again, plenty of bites happening, so definitely fish feeding, even though the tide has turned. There's a big boat just coming up here now. I've got a bit of a slack line bite going on over there, which is possibly a flatfish actually. Looking a bit ominous. We'll just put the camera down, I think. Just in. So the slack line bite is sort of gently tightened back up again, which suggests possibly a flatfish. In the meantime, the rain is really starting to try and come down now. The other side of the river had disappeared, and instead of it, we've got a humongous boat. It's come in, Broanna, this one's called. So that's a bit of a monster. I'm not going to get out and get soaked, but less that line again there, which is encouraging. So a really big boat this time. This one's definitely empty. I assume come in to collect. Looking at the water line on the bottom, but my goodness, that's a big boat. Both lines dropping slack, really encouraging. So I think I'm going to put the camera down for the time being, and we'll see if we've got anything to show you in a little while. And just hope this rain drops off, because we don't want to be getting too wet if we can help it. We'll see you in a while. Yeah, as suspected. Very pleased again. Another dab and a whiting, double header. I've dropped the hook size down. As you can see, that's got this in its mouth this time, just about with the hook. Easily come unhooked, of course, straight back in just now. Nothing massive on dabs, because they don't go very big anyway, but just such a nice change from the whiting. I love catching whiting as well when there's nothing else to catch, but I especially like flatfish, and the other rod bouncing away with a big hook on it, so chances are we may even get another one. But dropping the hook size down, I think some size 4s those, definitely made a difference. So we'll get some fresh baits on, we'll get the rods back in again. Okay, still getting bites on the rods. I had another couple of whites in while it was raining. It's finally passed, so that's okay. I can see the other side again down there, head of the rods. As you can see, that was completely disappeared before. So it's 10 minutes, it's passed by. One of the white was actually quite a good one as well. It's the best one of the day so far. You tend to get a lot more smaller white in these days to what you used to do years ago, but that one was quite a decent one there before, but it was just a bit wet and horrid to be taking the camera out for a whiting, to be honest, in this situation. But yeah, the rods are still getting touches, bites, so we're going to keep persevering for a while longer and give it a try on the ebb now for a little while. So it's a completely new spot to me. I'm really pleased with the way it's gone as well. I mean, the rods just haven't stopped so far. Don't want to jinx it. But yeah, really interesting. And we'll certainly come back and give it another try here. For sure. So the light starting to slowly fade, but a little bit more rain. Nothing too drastic, thankfully. And I've been persevering. The bites seem to have dropped off a little bit, although I still am getting bites. As you can see, possibly on that closest rod to us. The wind is definitely getting up, because I can hear it in the trees behind us. So yeah, that forecast of the strong winds this evening, I think is probably going to be correct. At least. Generally speaking, I'd always say forget the Met, and they always seem to get the rain wrong at least. It's supposed to be not a drop of rain till later on this evening. I think it was 7 o'clock when I checked the forecast for Eastham, and as it is, it's rained quite a bit on and off here and there, but it's been okay. It's not been too bad. I think as long as you can stay dry in winter time, you tackle your bait and your seat and things like that, keep all that dry under the umbrella, then it makes for a much more pleasant fishing trip. If you're out in the elements in the winter, especially when it's cold, it's not overly cold today, but on a cold trip, if you're cold and wet and out in the elements getting blown to pieces, then it doesn't make for a pleasant winter trip. So certainly when you're winter fishing, for me anyway, you know, get yourself set up right, comfortable spots as you can get away with to a degree. This unfortunately isn't the most comfortable spot, because you are restricted quite heavily with the trees behind you. As you'll see, the trees are literally just right behind me here, and it's pretty much the same all the way along. There's a couple of little spots like where I am here. There's a few more down behind me where you've got a bit of room just to get your beach caster, other than fishing with maybe a pier rod or something, but then you wouldn't get as much distance, I suppose. A smaller rod would allow you to fish probably a little more comfortably along here. Well, it's a bit of a bad bite. I think it's still whiting. But yeah, it is a little bit restricted with casting, but that to be honest with you, I think, you know, there's a few little spots you can get into. As long as you get into one of those, you're okay, you can cast okay. Rod's still tippy tapping away there. I think that's going to have to come in shortly, have a little look at that. We'll give it a little bit longer. I'm really pleased with the way this fishing trip's gone. I've had a couple of species. Whiting is only really what I expected. Having had dabs as well, I think 3, one of them dropped off, but having had 3 dabs as well, I'm quite pleased. So yeah, really enjoyable little trip out. Cost me virtually nothing really. A little bit of diesel to get here. From where I am, it's about, what am I getting, 69.5 to the gallon out of my little diesel car at the moment. So I reckon I've probably used about £5 or £6 worth of diesel to get here and back home again. So free bait out the freezer, which I pumped myself in the warmer months, and mussel. So yeah, it's a nice, cheerful, cheap little trip out, and even managed to catch. So we'll get these in shortly, and we'll see if we've got anything to bring you back to. Some more whitings. Quite a pretty colour when you look at the markings on them as well. Nice little fish. So plenty of these to keep us busy on this trip, thankfully. We'll get this one back, get him back in. So another boat coming through. Coming to the end of my trip now. Bites have dropped off. I'm probably going to persevere a little bit longer, but as it's gone very quiet, Not suspecting anything much to come along, but you never know. So you've got to be in it to win it. So another one of these big boats being guided in by I think you call them a tugboat, although I think that one's probably tugging that. This is behind. But really enjoyable little trip. Definitely be coming back to try again here in the future. Maybe my next trip will be flounder fishing or something like that, somewhere maybe on the day there, but we'll see. Bit of a change. I do like catching flatfish, as I've said before. I can break out a bit more of my blanched frozen lugworm as well. Now, don't you just love it when a plan comes together? Because I thought to myself, I think it's a bit muddy close in here, so I thought I'll just drop in close for maybe a flounder or maybe perhaps a rockling, just for a change of species. And there we have it, a rockling. I'm really pleased with that. You know, when you sort of try different things and mess about a little bit, it's nice when things do work out. You know, especially if you purposely aim for a little species like this. It's not a monster. It's never going to be a record breaker, of course. But it's just nice to get something different. So it's a nice little, I think it's a 5-beard rockling by the looks of it. So yeah, another little change of species. Fantastic. I'll just maybe have another cast and just see if anything else should materialise. I was hoping for potentially a flounder as well close in, so I might just pop out another rig, another bait, and just see if there's any flounders knocking about. Because you never know. So, light's gone now. It's a little tugboat going back out. Possibly to go and get another boat. A big boat. That little rockling I just had was really nice to see. Especially as I've specifically tried to find one really. Either that or a flounder. And I've just put the rod back out again in the same sort of vicinity. Basically quite close in on what I think is mud. And there's a sort of a mix, you know, the ground I'm sort of looking at for flounders on the ebbing tide and rockling as well. I've been chucking little bits of bait in as I've been fishing, you know, off the hooks that I'm finished with, and that's prime sort of area there now for flounders and little rockling and then other little fish as well, purely because there's free food knocking about, getting wished and swirled around. So really, yeah, nice to see even just little rockling sometimes. Not a big fish as you said, but it's just nice to see. Now that is a Mr. Crabby Eyes, and that is a sure way to know it's time to go home. Because when Mr. Crabby Eyes comes out to play and starts taking your baits, you know the fish have gone. Not saying the fish won't come back on again and feed at some point, but for me, that's sign enough that the fish have stopped feeding for a while, and I'm going to call it a night. Hope you like the video. Hey, give it a like if you want to see some more. As I say, these work as just a serve show what's going kept being caught, especially if it's in your sort of area where you fish, and obviously say some little bits in between which might be helpful for you, especially if you're starting out new. Not that I know it all, it's just a case of I just do things my way and they seem to work okay in the end anyway. Once again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.